Okay, I think we're going to get started and then people can join in here. So I wanted to welcome everyone today to our cybersecurity awareness training for employees webinar. We are really excited to have you here. I am Anne, the marketing lead at Reis Informatica, and I'm going to be your host for today. And I wanted to just let you guys know if you do have any questions that you think of that come up through the webinar, just put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and we will answer those at the end of the webinar. We'll have a Q&A session. And before we get started, I did want to introduce our speakers to you today. So we have Patrick Kitchen on the call, and he is our Chief Information Officer here at Reis Informatica, and he has over 19 years experience in the IT industry, and he helps us to maintain and secure our clients' IT infrastructure, as well as many other duties. We also have Ryan Mitchell on the call today, and he is the Chief Operating Officer at Sandham Insurance Brokers, and he is specializing in business and personal insurance products. So I'm going to hand the floor over to Ryan, and he's going to discuss a little bit more about the importance of cyber insurance.
Great. Thank you for the introduction, and I appreciate that. And thanks to everyone for attending. Just wanted to start off by explaining Mitchell Sandham, who we are, what we do, how we fit within the insurance industry, as I think that will provide some pretty good context throughout our presentation. So first off, we are independent insurance brokers. So we do not represent or work for or work on behalf of any insurance company. We work strictly for our clients and our customers. We work with insurance companies, but our customers come first and foremost. And we represent majority of the leading specialty insurance providers in the market. The importance of that is it gives us choice. It gives us the ability to get multiple quotes and present multiple solutions to our clients that best fit their specific needs based on their business and their operations. And we are specialists. We are brokers that specialize in specific verticals. The one that I specialize in is professional and cyber liability insurance. This presentation will provide a great overview of both cybersecurity combined with cyber insurance, as the two are very closely related and becoming more and more related as companies expand their cybersecurity and apply for and purchase and renew cyber insurance products. So I think Pat and I both came together on this and saw the similarities and the intersection between the two. And we thought this would make for a great presentation, especially in the month of October, Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So first, I just wanted to start by explaining what cyber insurance is and the definition of cyber insurance. It's been referred to by several different names over the last few years. You probably may have heard of internet liability. I've heard network security liability. I've heard privacy breach insurance. But for the purposes of this presentation, we will just refer to it as cyber insurance. So what does cyber insurance include? Well, at its core, it offers a company protection from digital risks that are not covered by the traditional insurance policy. I can't tell you how many meetings I've been in and how many clients I've met with and reviewed their insurance, and their understanding is that their general liability or their office insurance package will provide coverage for a cyber breach, when in fact, in most cases, it's just not the case. So that's where we come into play as a broker to provide that advice, provide the review of the current policies, and make the suggestion for new policies such as cyber. So most companies are familiar with damage to physical property. And that is a for sure. You're going to buy insurance for your building, for your equipment, for your physical, tangible items. What businesses are missing out on is the understanding of what a cyber attack can do. These cyber attacks can be just as devastating as a large fire within your manufacturing plant, within your office. Cyber attacks in the industry, in the insurance side, it's not if, but when you suffer a breach, and how bad is that breach, how recoverable is that breach, and what's the cost associated with that, and are you prepared? Do you have everything in place, backups and so on, to be back up and running after that breach without any assistance from, let's say, insurance, or let's say from someone like Reis Informatica, and having Pat there and access to his expertise and resources? Is it something that you can do on your own? Depending, probably not likely, unless you're very sophisticated in technology and the IT side. So that's where insurance comes into play. And what makes insurance important, and cyber specifically, is that it allows that risk transfer, that cost, and that access to experts and resources if and when a breach does occur. You've got that immediate phone call, that immediate email to the insurer, to us, the broker, and resources and experts will be deployed immediately. It also allows you to continue focusing on your business and your day-to-day operations and not be as distracted as you would be if a breach did occur. So cyber insurance, it bridges the gap between the physical coverage and the digital coverage and the digital risks. And it allows a company to get back online quicker and resume normal business operations faster without suffering as much expenses and damages. Pat, have you been there to assist on that panicked phone call from a client?
More than a few times, and it usually starts out with something like, I can't get on my computer. I've got a weird message on my screen or something like that, and you find out really quickly that it's a ransomware attack. And then, pardon me, maybe you'll get extra calls from other people within the office with similar complaints. It's one of those things that it often catches everyone by surprise. Certainly no one's expecting an attack at any time, but they tend to manifest very, very quickly, and it's a very sudden event. So you'll find, you get into the office one morning and everyone's got a ransomware message on their screen and nobody can use their computer. At that point, what do you do? Even if you want to reach out to your insurance company, you have to take your phone out to look up the guy's number because no one's computer is working, and you might be in that state for several weeks, depending.
Yeah, definitely very scary moments. You want to make sure you're prepared and you've got the access to the resources for sure. So now that we've defined cyber insurance, we know what it's about. Let's talk specifically about coverages and what's covered. So first off, there is no standardized cyber insurance policy. It's not like auto insurance that one policy is similar to the next policy. Each insurance company has their own set of insuring agreements. They have their own unique coverages. Each company is trying to outcompete the other, providing enhancements, different limits, wordings are different, and how that policy pays is different. Is it a reimbursement policy, meaning that the company needs to have the cash and the ability to pay for these expenses along the way and wait for that reimbursement? Or is it the insurance company that gets involved from dollar one? So I've included on the next slide here a breakdown of all the coverages from one of the most comprehensive insurance policies on the market. And I won't bore everyone with all the details and coverages within here, but I did just want to talk about the two main aspects of the policy, or of a standalone specialized cyber insurance policy. You'll notice that there's what's called third-party liability insurance. Basically what that is, if if you did suffer a breach and were sued by one of your customers, your clients, for reputational or financial harm, you've got that coverage there for those defense costs and any damages that might be awarded. So a good example here might be, let's take a professional services firm like a law firm or an accounting firm. A lot of sensitive information, a lot of data that if it were exposed could cause a lot of customers, clients, and businesses quite a bit of aggravation, reputational harm, financial harm. Those companies, because of those damages, could sue your business because they were entrusting you to keep that information safe, and now it's out on the dark web or it's being sold on the web. And now your business is at risk because of that information being exposed.
And not only that, but you have a lot of statutory reporting requirements as well, especially here in Canada. If you have suffered a data breach, in many cases, you are obligated to report that to the Office of the Privacy Commissioner, which kind of opens up a whole other set of potential legal headaches as well.
Absolutely. Yes. Thanks for mentioning that, Pat. And that's why having that insurance company and that expert there available to walk you through that and those processes and when it needs to be reported based on the Privacy Act and PIPEDA, it's a resource that you want to have available. The next one is first-party coverages. This is what makes the headlines. This is what you see in the news. This is the expenses incurred and the damages incurred by a business from items like ransomware, extortion, business interruption as a result of a breach, fraudulent funds transfers. A good example here would be a ransomware attack where a cyber criminal gains access to your network and encrypts your data, and you can't access that data. And I'm sure, Pat, you've seen this before, and the difficulties and the panic that sets in when that happens. So that's an important aspect of the policy and the two main components between the two. And you can see that a cyber insurance policy like this captures all the latest scams, hacks, breaches, social manipulation that these cyber criminals look to exploit. And we'll talk just a little bit about the involvement of cyber and what insurance companies look for. But the biggest aspect, especially in the last few years with the onset of the pandemic, is cyber has become top of mind. It's also top of mind for cyber criminals because they can sit behind a computer from across the world and make money. It's not the risk of breaking into a physical location anymore. It is now looking for businesses that they can exploit because of a backdoor, so to speak, that's left open from a cybersecurity standpoint. And we've seen a lot of claims. We've seen the increase of the severity of these claims, the frequency that these claims are now occurring, and the pandemic brought that on and heightened that because a lot of companies needed to move quickly to remote access, working remotely, getting their employees online, and maybe some of these cybersecurity protocols or software was overlooked just to continue that business and continue operating and providing your clients with customer service, and maybe not focusing as much on the cybersecurity. And now we're seeing that transfer into claims. And we're seeing some insurance companies paying more in claims than they're taking in premiums. They're underwater. We've seen some insurance companies pull out of the market of cyber altogether, just because the data wasn't there and the exposure now being so much greater.
Yeah, and the anecdotal figure I've heard from peers in the industry is that it was, for every $1 in premiums taken in has resulted in $4 in claims. So you can certainly understand why there's a lot of carriers that just don't want in the market anymore. And unlike more traditional insurance products, say automotive insurance, there's a legal requirement that they have to offer you a policy. Where with cyber, there is no requirement. And depending on the nature of your business, if you have statutory requirements or regulatory requirements that dictate that you must have liability insurance, and if you don't meet the bar set by the insurance companies to gain that policy, then you might be out of business, or be unable to conduct business due to your lack of coverage.
Great point. Thanks, Pat. So cyber insurance, it's constantly evolving. It requires the most up-to-date systems, software, networks to be in place. And you're seeing that with the insurance companies that are still in this space, and the ones that are doing well are ones that ask for a lot of information. And they are not afraid to deny coverage or deny access to coverage because companies just don't have the bare minimum, and that bare minimum, that bar is now increasing substantially. And this is where someone like Pat can come into play and do that review for you to see what you have, what you need. I actually sent Pat a copy of the insurance application process, and that application for insurance can be quite onerous. It's very technical. It asks a lot of IT information and IT jargon that for Pat, he's used to seeing every day. And I think, Pat, you were saying that you've helped quite a few clients complete those application forms.
Yeah, and it's incredible to see how those forms have evolved over the last few years. I remember pre-pandemic, there'd be a question that says, do you use antivirus? Yes or no. Nowadays, I think the biggest insurance questionnaire I've filled out on behalf of a client was well over 100 questions. This was a very large organization, though. But overall, I've seen the trend of these questionnaires getting longer and longer and asking more and more detailed questions, to the degree that insurers are very up to date on what the current products are. They know what brand, what names to ask for, what buzzwords and industry jargon to use. And I've seen applications that get sent back where they say, you've got this antivirus or this application, but you don't have this recommended add-on, and we want you to get that as a condition of accepting this policy. Other things like, before it was, do you have multi-factor authentication on there? And that used to be a bit of a nice to have. Now they're asking, do you have it as a non-negotiable? And even going into further detail saying, well, where do you use it? Is it only needed to get into Office 365? Or are you using it for other cloud services? The questions are getting extremely detailed, and as you said earlier, Ryan, there's a lot of carriers that are just getting out of the business, and the ones that are staying in there are really taking every step possible to protect themselves.
Exactly. And that's why it's important to get your business cyber insurance ready. You want to approach the insurance companies with your application with a demonstration of what you have in place, what you're doing, and there's several items we can talk about. But I did want to just relate it back to, let's take something almost like home insurance, where home insurance is a fairly basic product. It differs a little bit between insurance companies, but from a security perspective of that home and what the insurance company looks for, if we take a high valued home, an insurance company is not going to insure your home without monitored burglar fire alarms, water leak detection systems, cameras, monitored cameras in place, all the security and the protection, because it's more about preventing a claim versus knowing that a claim is likely going to occur. Insurance companies want to know that you're safeguarding everything to the extent possible. So the cyber insurance is no different.
It all comes down to maintenance, really. If my insurance company, if I said I've got a 15-year-old roof, they're going to start reducing the amount of coverage I have for roof leaks and failures related to that. In the same vein, if you're running 15-year-old software, and I guarantee there's more than a couple people in attendance here that are running, say, Windows Server 2008, that's a 15-year-old product. That, just like your 15-year-old roof, needs to be maintained to protect the integrity of what it's protecting.
Exactly. And we're seeing that quite a bit on the cyber side. And on the home insurance side, if you give the example of the roof, insurance companies now are giving you a deadline. They'll give you 30 days to get that roof repaired. Otherwise, they're off risk and they will not be providing any more insurance coverage, because it's not when a claim will occur, or if the claim will occur, it's when will it occur. Water will come through that roof because it's not in good condition. So the same as with cyber insurance. If you don't have that protection in place, a breach is likely going to occur. So when we look at the transition from home insurance and the protection there, and we look at cyber, instead of, you know, the lock on the front door, like Pat mentioned, they're looking at multi-factor authentication, which, like Pat said, was a nice to have. If that checkbox isn't answered yes, most insurance companies nowadays will pass on providing that coverage. And Pat,
And
MFA saying yes is not just enough. There's quite a few different components to that, correct?
Absolutely. And it's, you know, what other services do you use MFA for? In my capacity here at Reis, I don't even know how many outside accounts I have, but pretty much all of them are secured with MFA, because, you know, it's just not enough anymore. There's a lot of publicly available password dumps that have been exposed from previous attacks elsewhere. And I've punched in my personal email address and I found, like, geez, that's a password I haven't used since high school, sort of thing. And all of this is out there for criminals to exploit. You know, when you mentioned the lock on your house, it's a great analog. If I wanted to, or someone wanted to break into my house, they're limited. One person can pick one lock at one time. That's not the case in the digital world. You can have effectively an unlimited amount of attackers leveraging an unlimited amount of attacks against the same door, looking for weaknesses. So that ability to parallelize these attacks makes them a heck of a lot more effective and a heck of a lot quicker. So while it's great to always use the home insurance analog, the risk on the cyber side when it comes to business is exponentially higher.
Exactly. So I've listed a few items here. There's many more, but the main ones that a cyber insurance company will look for is that multi-factor authentication. Is it in place? And is it in place for your email? Is it in place for the third-party applications that you're using? And is it in place for remote access? That's a main component right now.
And it's a fairly easy solution to implement, especially if you're in the Microsoft 365 or Office 365 ecosystem already. You know, there is a little bit of backend setup that your IT administrator will have to handle, but on a per user basis, you can get MFA set up on your own account in about 5 minutes. The personal test that I use, Microsoft has a fantastic, it's like 2.5-minute video on how to set up MFA on your personal account. I sent it to my 72-year-old dad and I said, hey, now this is an experiment. Watch this video. Call me back if you have any problems. Got a call back from him about 10 minutes later. He says, I'm all set. Fantastic. And, you know, this is a guy growing up, our VCRs would always be flashing 12 because he just didn't want to kind of program the time in there. So it's one of those things in the IT world that is one of the lowest amount of effort projects to complete that has the largest impact on your overall cybersecurity risk.
Great point. So definitely something that you as a business would want to have and get in place prior to applying for insurance, because it presents your business as a better risk than the next. They also look at enabling secure remote access. Now with work from home, hybrid work, accessing the network can be an area of large concern and an area that cyber criminals look to exploit. So they want to know what you're doing there.
And if you're not being specifically targeted, you know, a lot of these cyber attacks are more, you know, a bit of a shotgun blast, throw everything out against the wall, see what sticks. It's almost like when you're walking down the street and you see 10 bikes locked up on a bike post on a street. No one there has an impenetrable lock on their bike. You see various degrees of locks. You look at it, you're like, yeah, that's a little bit flimsy. That one looks pretty strong. But in the case of non-targeted attacks, you don't really need an impenetrable lock. You just need a lock better than the one next to you. Everyone is really a target, but the question is, are you a target of opportunity? Is the juice worth the squeeze? If it's going to be very hard to get into your network, they're likely going to give up and move on rather quickly. The methodology with these sort of attacks is win fast and fail fast. If you're able to, just peel something up that you can use as a wedge to get more and more access, great. But if you can't, they're going to move on to the next target. So simple things like MFA will exclude you from a lot of these low effort broad attacks.
The other component to that is, further to Pat's point there, is employee security awareness training. A lot of businesses we speak to and meet with say, oh, yeah, we train our employees. Okay, well, do you have a specific training program in place? Is it done on a consistent basis? And no, we hosted a webinar a year ago. Well,
yeah. With
the fast-paced environment and how things are changing so drastically, that's not sufficient anymore. So cyber insurers want to see that you're consistently staying up to date and you're training your employees, because the employee is the weakest link, unfortunately.
Every single time.
It's just the inquisitive nature of humans that want to click on a link that looks like it could be something interesting, or they see a document come in that references, a similar client, and instead of forwarding that or calling your IT experts, the first instinct is to click the link and check.
A lot of people just want to help, and that gets exploited.
Yeah, exactly. So having that awareness and that training in place, I think, Pat, is probably top of mind for a lot of companies, and should be top of mind.
Oh, absolutely. But reinforcing and continually testing that training is key. There's a lot of products out there that will not just do the training and testing, and I'm sure everyone's been through these webinars or these online training things where it's a video and it says, here's a shady looking email, what do you think? A lot of people sort of zone out for those things, but to back that up, you need robust testing, and a lot of training products will do phishing simulations, which I love looking over these reports, and not only love looking over them, but looking over them over time to see how they trend downward. You'll see products that will send simulated phishing emails, but then track the progression of it. So say emails go out to everyone in the organization, who opened it, or maybe not always who opened it, but what's the percentage of staff that opened the email? What's the percentage of staff that clicked through the email? And then worst, what's the percentage of staff that actually provided information to the simulated phish email? Now, those statistics are used as an educational tool. There's no sense in singling people out and saying you failed this test. This is about organizational security and overall security. So if you find that people are going all the way through and providing information, that's a teachable moment. And it's also a trackable statistic to say, well, in month one, we saw, let's say 5% of emails getting all the way through and personal information was provided. On month 4, we've seen that number down to 1%, or ideally 0%. And when staff know that there is an ongoing simulated phishing exercise happening 365 days a year, not saying you're getting 40 emails a day, but maybe there's a couple a week that are peppered in there, it's always top of mind. Then people know, they'll question it. Is this a legitimate email or not? And they're going to give it that second level of thought, rather than immediately falling back to their nature of I just want to help. There's a request that came in, I'm going to do my job and I'm going to help this person out, be it an internal person, an external person, or perhaps someone masquerading as either.
Great. So it just dovetails into the point of making sure that training is in place and it's continually progressed as new cyber scams come about, and just getting your people and your employees and your team to be more aware.
Yeah.
The next item I have on the list, it's a component of a cyber insurance policy, and it's funds transfer fraud. and implementing the best practices. And we have a document here that we decided to put together because we've been receiving a lot of questions from clients. We've been seeing a lot of claims from clients. And basically, this is where a company sends money to a cyber criminal. Unbeknownst to them, they were scammed, whether it be through social manipulation, whether it be through just monitoring email traffic. But I've got a couple items on here that I just wanted to point out. And one is, picking up the phone is probably your best option. Call the number that you have for that individual or that company that's requesting the funds before you send the funds. An email can look really legitimate, or it can look really bad. We've all received the emails that have the spelling mistakes, and it says to send $1,000 to this account, and obviously that's a pretty easy one to delete and avoid. But they're becoming, and Pat can speak to this, they're becoming extremely sophisticated, and we are paying claims to clients that have sent money to the incorrect intended person.
And I think the big delineating factor here between, the personal version of this and the corporate version of this is the amount of effort that's put into this. Now, the terrible ones with spelling mistakes that go to your personal email, those are pretty easy to pick up. The ones that go to companies, because they know, these criminals know the stakes are a lot higher. And when you're in a low cost of living country, a couple $100,000 Canadian dollars can go a heck of a long way to change your life. So they're not just blasting out a million emails. They're going to do some research. They'll look into the company on, say, LinkedIn or other publicly accessible stores of information to say, well, if I wanted to run a scam that says, geez, hi, human resources, I've changed my bank account, please change my my payroll information. Well, they could figure out through LinkedIn, well, let's look at some titles. Who's probably making a lot of money? Look at some titles again. Who's in finance that's going to facilitate this? Who's in HR that's going to approve this? And they'll name drop all the right names. If they clone an email, they can use that in conjunction with known names within the organization to make their argument a bit more compelling. Bit of a personal anecdote. I worked with a client in the senior care healthcare field, and they used a outside staffing company where in the domain name there was the letter G. The attacker bought the identical domain name except swapped the G for a Q. Now, on the surface, you'd think that would be pretty easy to pick up. When you go a little bit deeper, when we looked at the attack and really tried to unpack what happened, when you look at an email address in Outlook or any web browser, even in the email trail going down, domains or email addresses are often, almost always, underlined. Now, a lowercase g and a lowercase q, when underlined, look very, very similar. Very hard to differentiate. Obviously, if you're looking directly at it, looking for this difference, you're going to see it. But people aren't always going to scrutinize an email in that much detail. And that tiny little bit of a change in an email line, coupled with name dropping the right people, resulted in $70,000 US in a EFT that was sent out fraudulently. And unfortunately, the client at the time didn't have adequate coverage, and unfortunately, that was a loss. Certainly a teachable moment, but really, $70,000 all came down to a Q versus a G.
Exactly. It can happen quick. People have busy schedules. They want to get their tasks done. Like Pat said, it's compelling because there's not just one item that looks legitimate. There's 3 or 4. And so when you're moving quickly, those are just check boxes to say, yep, that's who sends me the request. The email is legitimate. They mentioned something personal. Looks good to me. It's under my threshold and my limit. I'm gonna send that amount of money. So that's why
and often, people at work, they want to do their job first. Scrutinizing things comes second, and unless it's top of mind to really scrutinize these things, they're just going to want to, do their job, make their boss happy, go home at 5 o'clock sort of thing.
Exactly. And that's point number 9. We have red flags and what to look for. That's great. That's the starting point. But from there, a couple other items that you may want to implement. One, which we really love, is called the penny test. If you're sending money to a new vendor, or sending money to a vendor you haven't sent money to in a while, or there's a change of banking information, whatever it might be, send them a penny. And then pick up the phone and call your contact based on the phone number you have already in your contact list, not a phone number that's included in the email, because you could be talking to the cyber criminal and they will pick up the phone and they will confirm the details exactly how they want it and the banking information. So do that penny test, follow up with a phone call. And then from there, again, it's making sure your employees are trained, making sure they're aware of what's happening, just so that $100,000, $80,000 doesn't just fly out the door to someone that it wasn't intended to be sent to. And insurance companies provide coverage for this, but they want to see these processes and these safeguards implemented and in place, because they're not in the business of just paying for your inability to send that money. They want to see what you're doing and what your processes are, because after one claim, if those processes aren't there or weren't there, it'll be pretty difficult to get any cyber insurance again.
Yeah, and often I find after a breach, the insurance company and often the third-party forensics agency that they'll bring in to do a postmortem will give a list of recommendations or recommendations to and say you've got 30, 60, 90 days to implement these recommendations, or we're no longer going to cover you. At the end of the day, insurance is a business. This isn't a benevolent charity. There's no sort of unlimited losses potential here. If an insurance company feels that you are not going to be a profitable client, then why are they going to do business with you? And that's where you have obligations. Just like home insurance, make sure your roof is secure. Make sure your locks work. If you have a monitored intrusion alarm, monitored flood, monitored fire, all of these things lower your aggregate risk and make you a more attractive client that will get more attractive rates.
Exactly. The other component is, yes, insurance may provide the coverage, but you also want to make sure, how do you look in the face of your clients and your customers if they find out that you're sending money to an incorrect person, or you haven't been safeguarding data, and these incidents keep happening. You suffer the ability of maybe losing customers because of that.
Even if it happens once, if I had someone who held my personal information that didn't take good care of it, then I'm certainly going to question how the rest of the business operates. And as we both discussed earlier, there are statutory requirements. If you suffer a breach and you are a custodian of personal information, there's a very, very good chance that you have to publicly report this breach. And part of that is going to be informing affected parties.
Exactly. So now we've talked about what's covered, the types of hacks and breaches that we're seeing. I put a next slide in here. We as brokers get access to quite a bit of information, quite a bit of loss history and experience, which is building up quite a bit, especially in recent years as insurance companies are paying more claims, they're seeing more claims, they're seeing more incidents. There's a lot more data available to us. So one item that comes up quite a bit is, well, great, we want cyber insurance. We need it. We know how important it is based on everything we discussed. Now it comes down to how much coverage you need. And that's really specific to the type of business you're in, the type of data you have, the type of information you have, where you do business is important. So we break it down. We get this, I've attached here as an example for a manufacturing company. This particular one is 50 employees. They do about 8 million in revenue a year. And it breaks down where the insurance company's seeing the most amount of claims for that particular business. how much are those claims at the end of the day, and that dictates how much coverage would be a good starting point to purchase, obviously considering budget and the cost of coverage as well. But it provides that benchmarking tool for us to have a discussion versus just picking some random number. And we can get these claims examples for several different industries, several different size of companies, and really target it towards your specific business.
And when we talk about the coverage amounts, you know, it's always, and I'm sure as someone who sells insurance, I'm sure your recommendation is always going to be aim a little bit higher. When we, you know, draw a personal comparison, I think the minimum third-party liability for auto insurance in Ontario is like 200,000. I don't know anyone, and I've never seen a policy that does less than $1 million, and I personally carry $2 million because the difference between 1 and 2 is negligible. But I know if some absolute catastrophe were to happen to me on the roadway, and I don't know, went through someone's house, and here in Toronto, that's $1 million right there minimum. It's always good to overshoot these things because losses like this can add up incredibly quickly. And you know, if we talk about things like privacy breach, then there's a lot of legal work that needs to happen. If we talk about things like ransomware, where your entire company is shut down, I've personally had clients where they have maybe 20, 30 employees, but every single computer is shut down. They need to be online immediately. So we dispatch effectively an army of technicians, and 150 bucks an hour for someone to show up times 15, 20 people, it adds up very, very quickly. Then we're talking about lost revenue. Then we're talking about employee overtime to recover from this. There's certainly a lot of work. And I would pose a question to those of you in the audience. Do you know what your recovery time objective is? If your server goes offline or you lose access to some key corporate data with your backups, what's your recovery time objective? Meaning if it goes down, say at 10 o'clock in the morning here, how many hours until you're back in business? The next question would be, what is your recovery point objective? Because we know most backups will run daily, very good backups will run, hourly or less. But if you run daily backups and you have a ransomware incident, well, you're looking at losing that day's worth of data. And what is the cost of recreating that data? If we look as an example of, say, a law firm, you've got a couple of lawyers that are billing out several $100 an hour, and how many of them need to repeat an 8-hour day? So it's very difficult to quantify how much coverage is required. You can walk around your house and say, yeah, I got about this much dollars worth of stuff. My house would cost about this much to rebuild. It's a lot easier to quantify that. But when in the business world, what is the reputational damage? What is the legal remediation? What's the cost of redoing work? And potentially, what is the cost of lost business from clients who say, well, I don't think I trust you with my information anymore. So, the ripple effect of what these claims cost is very, very, very difficult to quantify and ratchets up very quickly.
Well, thank you guys. That was great. I definitely learned a lot in there. Some great examples as well. I'm going to let Patrick talk just a little bit more about the cybersecurity training for employees now. Patrick, if you wanted to go ahead.
Sure. So I've got on screen here 3 very, very common cyber attacks that we see. Ransomware, you've heard both of us say that several times today already. Phishing email and CEO fraud. And a lot of these are very interconnected. We can see phishing leads to ransomware, phishing leads to CEO fraud can lead to ransomware. And it really underscores the need for robust cybersecurity training, but not a one-off thing. This is something that needs to be refreshed and reinforced as much as possible. Huge fan of ongoing phishing simulations because it just keeps that kind of stuff top of mind. Now, a few pardon me, a few anecdotes I can give here of real world scenarios that have happened to real companies. Phishing emails, like I said, when ransomware gangs are targeting individual businesses, they will absolutely do their research. They're going to know what are the names of the managers out there. They'll even get, pictures from LinkedIn and stuff like that. Anything that they can do to craft a far more convincing narrative when they send that email out. And I gave the example earlier of the Q versus the G that led to $70,000. We saw another instance where on the CEO fraud side of things, the CEO was phished. They had the attacker gained access to their email. From there, they were able to go into Outlook Web and create this very intricate mesh of forwarding rules, where the attacker started initiating a bunch of password resets for third-party services that then went to the CEO, to their compromised email inbox, and because of the rules that the attacker set up, CEO never saw these emails come in. They were immediately forwarded outside. The attacker was able to go through the password reset. Once the reset confirmation email came through, that was also sent directly to the attacker, and the CEO had no idea. All of their accounts, one by one by one, were being compromised. Now, what was the ultimate goal of this attacker? Pardon me. This company initiated a funds transfer. The CEO made a request to their finance team, such and such vendor has changed their banking information. Please use this information and pay them whatever invoice. The invoice worked out to be 300,000 and change. This is a a smaller family-owned company in the Ottawa region. They lost $300,000+, and because of insufficient cybersecurity coverage, they, long story short, were unable to make payroll. And it was a very, very difficult time for this company. It cost them an absolute fortune. And really what this came down to at the end of the day was failure to identify a phishing email. And it's incredible how a momentary lapse in judgment, a momentary oversight can snowball into something so massive. Ransomware is another thing just like that, where an employee clicks the wrong link, they install the wrong program, they trust something more than they ought to, and then they get ransomware. And ransomware gangs, as I said earlier, the money that they take in can very well be life-changing in a lot of places. So they put in a significant amount of effort to mitigate what companies and security companies are doing to mitigate their threat. So they'll find that if they infect a computer and immediately start encrypting it, well, it's going to be a lot easier to determine where that initial attack came from. There was a particular variant of ransomware that was popular in 2019 bleeding into 2020 called Sodino Kibi, run by a Russian ransomware gang, where upon infection, it would start a 1 million second countdown before it actually did anything. And 1 million seconds works out to like 10 or 11 days or something like that. So you'll be infected on Monday, but you're not really going to experience symptoms until the following Wednesday, which first off makes it very difficult to determine where that attack came from. But in a very brilliant but insidious way, it also taints your backups. Because a lot of companies, when they get ransomware, if you've got very robust backups, you're going to think, well, this is terrible. I'm going to have a very bad day today, but I have all my backups. So I'm going to restore from my backups. But what you don't know is now you say restore back on day 10 of an 11-day countdown, and then the next day you're going to be re-encrypted. And ransomware truly acts like a cancer within an organization, and the ability to reinfect is almost limitless, because it just takes one computer that was either not cleaned out or not restored from a clean backup to reinfect, which would then propagate out through the network once again. It's life-changing amounts of money for the people that are operating these scams, and they know it. They know how they've been defeated in the past, and it's a constant learning exercise. So even from an internal perspective from each company, a very important component to cybersecurity is what we call incorporating lessons learned. When you have a successful attack or even an unsuccessful attack, analyzing what happened, what went wrong, was this, some sort of fluke that potentially won't happen again, or was there a failure of either policy or security within the organization that can be addressed? So, taking a retrospective look and asking yourself, where did things go wrong? How was I exploited, and how do I prevent myself from being exploited again, is absolutely paramount. And laddering back to our discussion about insurance, a lot of insurance applications will ask that specific question. Does the organization incorporate lessons learned after cybersecurity breaches? As Ryan said earlier, there's a lot of carriers that have left this specific industry. They don't want anything to do with cybersecurity insurance anymore because, frankly, it's a money loser. And most of the people we have in the audience here are business owners, so you're not going to put time and effort into a product line that's a loser. So moving on, let's say you've been attacked. Well, what's the next step? How long are you going to be down for, and what is the cost of that? I gave an example earlier about an organization that had to have this army of technicians deployed. Another client I worked with, also in the healthcare space, they had about half a dozen different senior care facilities in the United States. They got ransomwared. The writing was on the wall. They were running old servers. They had Windows 7 everywhere. The company just did not take security very well. And as an IT partner, we're just that. We're a partner. We make recommendations, but this isn't our business, and we're not dictators. We can make very strong recommendations as to what we feel is going to be effective, but ultimately it's up to the client to accept or not accept those recommendations. In this specific case, half a dozen sites were down for a full 2 weeks while everything was wiped, while we looked at recovering from backups. And that's why earlier I mentioned, what is your RTO and RPO, recovery time and recovery point objective? How much data are you going to lose if you run daily backups, weekly, nightly, whatever that may be? And how long will it take you to come back? I worked with another company years ago that was in the media production space, and they had, and at the time, this still is, but at the time, an absolutely gargantuan amount of data, 60, 80 terabytes, just massive, massive amounts of data on a 100 megabit fiber line. So the question came, what is your recovery time objective? If you suffer a total loss and you've got a 100 megabit fiber line for 60 to 80 terabytes, really should have done the math on this, but it's about 2 weeks, if not more, at 100% capacity of your internet circuit. So, yes, you have your data, but it's still going to take you several weeks to get it all back. And all of that downtime comes with a cost. You've got your staff payroll that you're still going to be paying their salary. And in fact, you're probably going to be looking at overtime or time in lieu, because a lot of staff are going to have to either redo work or other sort of remedial activities involved in getting your business back up and running after an attack. And something like this really can't be stated firmly enough. This is 2022, almost 2023. We are exclusively reliant on our computers and our technology, and it's very important for organizations to ask themselves, what if all my computers stop working once? What if I come in the morning and none of them are working? And I always like to be very careful in these conversations of not promoting FUD and scaring people with unfounded statistics, but as we've seen, and as Ryan has seen outside of the IT industry, this is a very real threat that has really been accelerated by the shift to work from home, which is, personally fantastic. I work from home myself, but it's always important when there's a shift in business that there's also a shift in security, or at a bare minimum, an understanding of what the implications are of shifting your business. So, work from home as an example, making sure that you're either cloud first and using MFA, or if you're still using traditional VPNs, making sure that those VPN connections are secured as much as humanly possible. And depending on your industry and depending on the level of sensitive information that you have, consider investing in a outside penetration test or an outside security audit that is not conducted by either your IT managed services provider or even your internal IT department. It's always good to get a third party fresh set of eyes that is not invested in the company, or at least isn't prone to overlook their own mistakes. Someone with a fresh set of eyes that's going to give you a truly neutral understanding of what your security posture is like, and what threats in the overall threat landscape are going to be more targeted towards your business. So I think now that we've really had a chance to scare people a little bit, let's talk about more mitigating ways to mitigate these threats. Obviously, we talked about the low-hanging fruit, things such as multi-factor authentication, making sure that you have centralized management of not only your workstations, but the applications on them. Your antivirus is of no use unless you can prove that it's up to date all the time, and that you can prove if a certain user's computer didn't get an antivirus update for whatever reason. Maybe it was off, maybe there was an application glitch, or maybe, let's say, Anne was on vacation for 2 weeks and that's why her computer didn't check in for 2 weeks. Just making sure that those things are being monitored and being addressed. Now, a lot of companies, if you were, say, a bank, big firm, big accounting firm, law firm, whatever, you probably have what's called a SOC, a Security Operations Center. Smaller companies often don't have the budget to benefit from that, so they'll do something called a third-party SOC, or Security Operations Center, where you farm that out to an outside agency who will then monitor your devices for you. They can aggregate your firewall logs to see, well, hey, there's some bad password attempts, or sorry, bad login attempts from, Russia or something like that, Brazil, China, areas where you see threat actors act or work out of frequently. Same thing with your Office 365 tenant, or if you're still on-prem Exchange or another mail server, something that's going to be proactively monitoring those logs. When we see security incidents happen at client agencies, we find often that we can see what's happened in a retrospective way, but proactive prevention of these attacks is quite a bit more important, because certainly you have folks like Ryan and insurance companies that can come in after an attack, but ideally you could prevent it from happening to begin with. So with a combination of more higher effort things like a managed SOC, managed endpoint security, lower effort things such as MFA, making sure passwords are robust and not recycled. A lot of companies still have password policies that say 6 or less characters, 8 or less characters, something like that. The new standard now is 15 plus. And when I tell clients that, a lot of them are, a bit aghast. How am I supposed to remember something like that? But it comes down to, I guess, what the industry's done by changing the word password to passphrase. Things that are, short and more complex, where you say, take, the word locations here on screen, and you change the L to 1, O to 0, I to 1, things like that. That is no longer seen as more secure, where there is security in length, or what we call security in obfuscation. The longer the password, the harder it is to breach. There's a lot of really cool tables you can see that basically anything under 8 or 10 characters right now can be cracked within minutes to hours, sometimes even seconds, depending on the algorithm used. But if you extend beyond 10 or 15, that then goes into the years or hundreds of years at supercomputer levels of compute. How do you achieve that easily? Well, what I like to tell people is just addresses of landmarks. If you want to change it up every week or every month rather, or every 2 months. You know, the address of the White House, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. How many characters is that? Your childhood home, the school you went to as a kid, your university's address. Anything that is not guessable, that is long and complex, is going to make it a heck of a lot harder to guess. I mentioned earlier about publicly accessible password breach databases and how I found my own passwords from many, many years ago. And that's a key reason why none of my passwords are anything alike anymore. Where there's a lot of people that are still using, say, variations on passwords they've used for years, which somewhat opens up a different discussion of looking into something like a password manager. Many of you are using this already through, say, Google Chrome, or it can suggest passwords. You have one very secure master password, but say when you log into Facebook, it will suggest a very long, complex password for you and manage that for you. So really, it comes down to there being a very, very broad array of potential solutions. There's potential ways to mitigate these threats, but ultimately, you need someone on your team that's going to help you guide you through this. From the technical side of things, certainly here to help anyone in attendance here. From the insurance and liability coverage point of view, absolutely reach out to Ryan and our friends at Mitchell Sandham. But at this point, this is really the end of our presentation. And if there are any questions from the audience, anything that you'd like us to dive deeper onto, anything that you need clarifying points on, please ask away. You have our undivided attention.
I have a question actually that was emailed to me earlier.
Sure.
And this one is more for Ryan. For the cyber insurance, what is the response time once a breach occurs?
As soon as that's reported, most insurance companies are within the hour, if not quicker.
Yeah.
They've got 24/7. At the end of the day, the insurance company wants to mitigate that loss as much as the client does, right? It's going to mitigate how much the claim will actually cost at the end of the day. The quicker they can gain access to it, the less disruption to the business. And like Pat was saying, these cyber breaches and these cyber incidents, it's not just one item that's targeted or is impacted. It is that cascading effect of ransomware to business interruption to downtime. It's one of those things that the quicker you can respond, the better the outcome will be. So it is fast. They have 24/7 response times, and the insurance companies that are dedicated to this space are set up to handle claims quickly.
Yeah, the process has evolved quite a bit. You know, when I get a notification that a client's been breached, I pretty much cancel every meeting I have for that day. As Ryan said, within the hour, you will have some sort of response. There's a bare minimum amount of chain of people that need to be notified internally within the insurance company. But within the hour, you're going to get a call back from someone. Probably within 2 hours, you're going to be on the phone with a forensics company. There's several that I've dealt with in the past. And that is pretty much your entire day. You know, the first concern is going to be shoring things up, securing the perimeter, as it were, and making sure that they can stop the attack that's in progress. You know, unlike a physical break-in, you're going to know if someone's snooping around your house or your business, pilfering your things. But depending on your security posture, you may not have that insight. There's certainly a tremendous amount of companies out there that aren't able to answer the question, who's in my file server right now? You know, even for legitimate traffic, to the attendees that we have now, do you have that degree of insight? Who has files open right now? Who was the last person to save a file? Who was the last person to send a file? What are those files? These things are all unknown, which is why the insurance companies and their forensic agency partners are going to be looking at, securing that perimeter immediately, because once you know you've been attacked, that's not the end of it. This is only really the beginning of stopping it and the beginning of recovering from it.
Okay. Now, another one that I had was, are there any incidences where the company may not be covered, like they wouldn't qualify for the coverage?
Depending on the insurance policy and the insurance company, there are some pretty specifics within those policies. Like I was mentioning, some policies are better than others, but we are seeing some insurance companies add certain requirements. So let's take the example of a funds transfer fraud. We've seen insurance companies put endorsements onto policies that state we will not pay a funds transfer claim unless the phone call has been made. They call it a callback provision. If you received an email that requested a change of banking information or a payment or an invoice to be made, did you pick up the phone and call that individual to verify that information? So we're starting to see insurance companies put the word, I hate to use the word exclusions. Us as a broker, we try to negotiate those out as much as possible to have the broadest coverage for customers. But given the frequency and the severity of claims, we're starting to see insurance companies tighten up on some of their coverages and wordings. Not to say it's not covered, as long as you follow the protocols and you understand what you need to have in place. It's like a jewelry store. If your alarm's not on, you're not going to be covered for that burglary in the middle of the night because you have an alarm warranty on your policy. We're getting to that point within the cyber insurance space.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to a greater theme of the onus of security being placed more firmly on the policyholder versus the insurance company. Again, they don't want any part of a business that's not profitable, so they need to make sure that some of that liability is shared and that businesses are taking bare minimum steps to secure themselves. This is certainly an evolving industry. We didn't have cybersecurity policies 10, 15 years ago are nothing like they are now because the threat landscape has changed so significantly, and our reliance on digital means of storing information is total now. There's not a lot of companies that are paper record first these days, and because of that, the amount of risk is exponentially higher than it was even 5 or 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I don't think we have any more questions. If you do think of any other questions, again, please feel free to reach out to us. I guess we're going to just wrap this up, but I wanted to say thank you for everyone on the call for joining today, and a huge thank you to Ryan and Patrick. I don't know about you, but I learned quite a lot. So it was a very informative session. So thank you. I will be following up and sending you an email by tomorrow that will include the recording of the session. So if you want to share it with anyone, or if you missed something, you can rewatch it. It also includes all the contact information as well. So again, if you want to reach out to us, feel free at any time. So thank you so much for joining, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.